Today's guest is Karimah Hassan. Karimah is a London-based painter, muralist, and ex-architect whose art focuses on community-driven storytelling. Karimah creates from the studio, the canvas, and the street. Her work moves between each of these spaces, questioning the demarcation between street art, fine art, and community art. Karimah's paintings can be found in community spaces and showcased as part of community events. Her work has also been exhibited in institutions such as the Standard in New York, Selfridges, the Barbican, and most recently the Rosewood in London. And partnerships with Burberry and other luxury houses have allowed her to expand her artistic vision into new contexts. Aside from her paintings, Karimah expresses herself through spoken word poems on social media and through her Substack called Gremlins, both of which give you a glimpse into her consciousness and her rich inner world. It is through both of those channels that I have noticed Karimah observe the world from a place of compassion and connection, extending deep grace and kindness both to others and to herself. Karimah, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you for that beautiful write-up. That's lovely.
I mean, it was so easy. You do so much. I was like, this is like the easiest intro I've ever written. I think I love to start podcasts usually asking people how they're feeling. So how are you feeling today?
I am feeling excited and yet grounded. I feel quite grounded and just really thankful, really grateful I get to be here and speak to you and just enjoy this process.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Tell me about your journey to becoming an artist.
Where to begin? It's really interesting. I have an elevator pitch, I could say, but
not the elevator pitch.
I mean, actually, I had a conversation with someone this morning, and he was asking me, "Oh, so how did you get into this?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm self-taught," and he was surprised by that. And then we were chatting, and I told him, "Okay, well, I used to be an architect, and then I found another way through it and stuff." But about 5 minutes later, he said to me, "So when did you start drawing?" And I was like, "Oh, before I really started speaking." I always drew and used color as a way to try and say to people, this is where I'm at, this is how I'm feeling. Like, honestly, from like 3 years old.
Wow.
And I remember viscerally, like having so much emotion inside of me. And just, it was so clear to me when I put it on paper. And I just thought, I don't have the words. This is how I'm feeling. And it just wasn't met by the adults around me, understandably so, because we're not really taught to see and read between the lines, especially from children. But it really did start. I was speaking to this person today, and I thought, well, actually, no, it was there all along. But technically, I call it like quote unquote going all in around 2019, where I just gave myself kind of cliche coming of age film. Like, I gave myself 3 months. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
Just don't tell anyone. It's a secret. Like, give yourself 3 months and see what can happen. Meanwhile, I'd been bridging like this really awkward, frustrated, messy middle for about 1.5 years, that feeling of lostness and just kind of like trying to find ways to feel more creatively fulfilled, trying to find like a solution. And then, I sent out a portfolio to a gallery in New York, serendipitously got it, ran away to New York, gave myself 3 months and never looked back.
What does that transition period look like? Like, were you doing other things
Oh,
and kind of like art
I had
on the
5
side?
jobs. I was I had 5 jobs, one of them being cat sitting in London to get free rent, one of them being working in a gym, another one being graphic designer, freelancing, another being like an illustrator. And it looks like just hustling and using that one thread of joy that you get from the one thing to feed your energy for the other things, and like just kind of constantly repeating a mantra of like, you get to where you want to be by just doing these steps, like just focus, just have faith and just keep going. And it looks like hard work.
Yeah.
It looks like just trying to make it in a world where it's not always easy.
Yeah, because you have a vision, like you see something for yourself, and it's not necessarily something you can explain to anyone that doesn't see it.
For sure, yeah. And I think there's also a part of you that doesn't see it yet because you're not there. So you're not only potentially, when you're in that messy middle or that bridging ground, you're like, you have one foot in your old life, one foot almost in the new life, and you're kind of, there is a point where you're just doing the splits and you're trying to like keep it together, these two worlds, until eventually one of them has to break and you have to like really just go into the next world or go into the next island or just like make that, traverse that step. But whilst you're doing the splits and you're trying to like stretch yourself, there's this like feeling of slight like belief and determination and faith, and also just fear and like things falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's
think I
easy to
know
be
what you mean.
nostalgic about it. It's like easy to be like, oh yeah, it was so beautiful, and like you know, but
I think I'm in it. So I think it feels like that. It does feel like that.
I think we'll often be in it because, you know, we're always, ideally, we're always ascending, always evolving, always expanding. As humans, as consciousness, we're always like trying to expand. And as soon as we kind of get to one place, we kind of want to see and deepen our worth, and we want to see where we can shine and grow and radiate and become. So as soon as you get to one of those launch pads, we're like quick to jump to the next, or we're quick to like try and leap to the next. And yeah, it's normal that we'd be in it.
Yeah. And also just to be not just one thing, which I struggle with because I just want to be everything, you know? So
what do you want to be?
I don't know. I mean, I'd love for this podcast to take off and do really well, but I'd love to like meet different kinds of people. And I think build a kind of community. I feel like, not all the time, but I feel like a lot of times conversations can be quite surface level. And, you know, you can put yourself out there and network and go to things, but you can sometimes come away from those things and feel like, oh, I'm not sure I really connected in the way that I would want with someone. And so I think what I'm craving is to connect with people on like a soul level.
That made me think of like, you can only really like almost like you can only understand to the level at which you're willing to be understood, right? Or you can be, and the deeper you are, I guess, like that yearning for connection on a soul level is visceral, because it's harder, because you know, you have to like kind of bear more from the depths of yourself and be understood from the depths of yourself. And that made me think of like, when you connect with someone, what does like a successful connection feel like? Like, does it feel like, do you feel relaxed in your body? Do you feel stimulated? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel like, what does it feel like?
It feels like my nervous system is relaxed, and it feels like this person is safe and this person sees me. And I have that with like two of my best friends, and I feel like every time I'm around them, it's like the most comforting, warm feeling. And I've had that like bits of it with people I've met, but obviously with the way the world works, everyone lives all over the place. So like I went on a retreat and I met some wonderful people, but they live in like
that's hard,
far-flung places. So it's just really hard to like build something in one place.
I find that I have like a lot of, because I love to travel. I get so inspired from traveling, and you know, whilst I recognize that's such a privilege, it's also a choice I'd rather be in flux and expand. So when you travel a lot and you experience in the world, you often meet like-minded people who have that same thirst for life or that curiosity, but then they end up being all around the world. And so I think that is part of like the paradox of it, or the frustration of like belonging everywhere and nowhere.
Yeah.
And part of that kind of having to like connect with yourself so deeply that you don't need, when you meet another and you connect with another, it's a bonus.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a joy and it's a blessing. But you can navigate the world knowing that if you don't, you belong also.
Yeah.
It's a very human need to want to connect, to share, to lean on, to be helped, to help, to love.
Yeah.
To receive love. Like it's essential. And I think that we almost sometimes demonize that need to be needed or that need to need. We kind of, it's like this weird, again, a paradox of you can only connect to the level of which you're willing to show. And you can only really be as strong as to the level of which you're willing to be needed and to show you can be needed. And it's like, yeah.
Okay, really deep.
Anyways.
I love that.
Therapy.
Yeah. Going back to you, in that time of like transition,
Yeah.
were there any kind of mental blockers that prevented you from becoming a full-time artist sooner?
Oh, massively. Yeah. I think, well, I mean, the word sooner is like, I do believe in the perfect timing. Like, I believe in divine time, and I do believe that everything happens with the grace of perfection. And even if it's not my perfect in that moment, looking back, it's always perfect. So it didn't need to happen sooner because, like, it just happened when it needed to have happened. At the same time, for sure, there were blocks. And I guess the easiest way to describe it is maybe like to separate them into like internal blocks and external blocks. So internal blocks may be like internal systems. So like, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I've never seen it done before. I don't come from a creative family, or like no one in my family is like has like a professional creative career, or like no one in my family is self-made as a business person, or I don't know how it's done. I don't know where to go. Like there was just so many unknowns, and there were so many kind of like I could have list you 100 reasons why internally the blocks were there, and then I could list you. Then, therefore, the external blocks would just be reaffirming the internal beliefs. So I would look for reasons of, okay, so I have these examples externally of why I'm not good enough, but it's because the internal mind is just looking for affirmation of what we believe in. So the external blocks, yeah, maybe, there's so many, like education, finances, resources, access, confidence, like so many things. But what's really cool is that like I started to realize like how capable we are to rewire our brains and rewire like our neuroplasticity of our brains. And I really just went all in on just kind of like teaching myself how to rewire my internal systems. And I just started doing like a lot of reading about self-development, self-growth, and being self-taught, and like even things like The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, or like, like poetry, or just like going and just devouring talks on YouTube, and just the incessant once I was honest with myself and realized like this creative pressure and this block is not something that's going away, and it's making me ill by not following it, and then just following that and given that gradually, like increment by increment, time to expand, to the point where then a year and a half after that, I started doing the inner work to allow myself to actually try and make that like a viable career path. To then like a year and a half after that, just seeing this like the evidence stack up, and then building craft and building experience and building connections, to the point where then you were just constantly evolving. But those blocks, there's so many gifts behind the blocks as well. I love dragons. I absolutely love dragons. This is a tangent.
Okay,
but like
no,
I
tell
love
me.
dragons. So I grew up in Wales, and we have like a dragon on our flag.
Yeah.
But also, I grew up loving Mulan. She has a little dragon.
Oh, I love Mulan.
And I just always, I've always connected to the dragon and the dragon spirit, and the dichotomy between the Eastern depiction of a dragon, which is this connection to the divine and connection to serpent energy and connection to mystical power and something to be ridden with. And then the Western power imagery of the dragon, which is something to be slayed and something to be overcome and something to be kind of like axed. And I've always been interested in that dichotomy between the two worlds. And I always see myself as being able to bridge like multiple worlds and viewpoints, and especially East and West, the way I grew up in Wales, but like from Bangladeshi Yemeni parents, and then also like in a secular school, but from a faith upbringing, like all these worlds that kind of collide. And I've always loved dragons. And to bring it back, yeah, I always think about, well, what does a dragon do? It guards treasure, and it makes total sense. And like, if you had a temple, if you had a sacred temple, and you had all of this treasure and this gold and all of this wealth and this knowledge, and privilege and just great abundance, you would get the fiercest creature to protect it, right? And I think that internally we have all of this growth and this treasure and this gold. It makes sense that you're going to have the biggest dragon to protect it. You're going to have the biggest, what you think are demons, protecting the most glorious treasure. So these kind of blocks, the reason why it's worth overcoming them, because it's hard, it's really hard. You go through ego deaths, you go through loneliness, you go through trials and tribulations. Yeah, but it's like there has to be something, right? Because why else would we take the leap? Why else would we be uncomfortable? There's got to be a gift, and that gift is your own inner gold, your own inner strength, your own inner goodness. But there are dragons that are protecting it. And so it's like, well, do you try and slay the dragon? Do you try and slay the blocks? Or do you try and ride them? And do you try and like see that block as like a divine gift? And you can ride it. You can be like Mulan with, like, do you know what I mean? You can ride it. And it's just like, that's why I love.
Or Harry Potter when he's like,
exactly. Like all of these beautiful imageries, I just think we don't have to, the blocks, they're scary and they might seem like you can't navigate them, but like they're worth trying to get to that treasure. Is why, yeah.
I think it's the most beautiful metaphor I've ever heard. Oh, I loved that. And I'm thinking about dragons in a completely different way now. How did you know, like, was there a moment where you were like, I can make a living from this? And was that the best feeling ever?
It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I remember again, New York seems to have like, I've got such a special place in my heart for New York, and it just unlocked so much. And New York was the first place I ever sold a painting. And I remember it was like in this underground, in the studio, and it was called Con Artist Collective. It's not there anymore, in Lower East Side, New York. And we shared it with like 50 artists, and it was always like any time of day, any time of night. It was just there's always people there. And some of them are crazy characters, and they had this underground garret, like basement part. And I just had the best time. And it was the first time I ever felt like I belonged. I'd never been around artists before in my life. Like, I'd never been around artists. And that was the first time in my life I was around artists. And like, all of a sudden, I was just like, this is where I belong. I've been this, like, I belong here. Anyways, one night, the owner, he was like, oh, there's this person. He sometimes like invest in artists, and he's like invited us all to his loft, whoever wants to come around. So we go to this person's loft, super wealthy, and it's a stunning loft. It's like he's just like such a soulful person. You walk into the loft and it's like smelling of incense, and there's like every wall has a story. And he's just bought loads of pizzas. And obviously these like skin artists are just like devouring the pizzas. They're not even there to talk. They're just there for the free ride. And especially New Yorkers, they're just like, they just say yes, and they're so upbeat. Anyways, I get talking to between the art gallery person and the person whose loft it is. And he must have seen something in me, because he was just, we engaged in conversation. And then, a few days after, he stops by the gallery and he purchases one of these watercolors that I'd made. And I remember being like, because I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. I literally, the craziest thing, like, I can laugh about it now, but I haven't even told my mum, but like, I didn't have money to pay for food. And so like, I remember like, just the paradox of life at that point, where like, I didn't have money to pay for food in the morning, but then we would like go out, and you could have like the wildness of New York experience. You could have like a like something crazy could happen. You could be around wealthy people with like an incredible dinner and you'd be like, what just happened? But it was just weird. But I remember not having enough money to pay. And this person, he covered the cost of the painting was the cost of that rent for that month. And I was like, whoa.
That's divine.
Yeah. And I was also like, this feels like liberation, like being able to, yeah, I just remember that being like, wow, like something can change really quickly. You know, like someone can buy a piece of your work and all of a sudden you don't have to worry for the next month. Not to glamorize like that state of not knowing where your money's going to come from either, because it's not a nice way to live. But at the same time, I remember like just that thread of like, okay, you can make money from art. And then simultaneously, I remember someone saying we'd go this gallery would like host talks. And at that point, and I still am, I was just like eager to take in any information. And they would get like artists to give talks. I remember this one artist, she rocked up and she was wearing all pink. She had like stick on like teddy bears. She had like crazy wacky hair and she was just the most outlandish walking caricature of a person. And she looked like the best time ever. and then she delivers a pitch and she basically says that like she was just super professional and super savvy and really on it. And like the total antithesis of what you'd think a quote unquote starving artist would be. And she was just, I remember her saying the best artists are business people. And I remember thinking, what? Because also another block was like, like artists, surely artists, there's drugs involved, there's alcohol involved, there's like debauchery, there's scary situations. I had all of those blocks too that were like preventing me from thinking I could be my authentic self in those spaces. And basically what I'm trying to say is the more artists I met, the more my beliefs were kind of knocked out the window. And I was just like, a lot of those limiting blocks I had are not true. And also you should never judge a book by its cover, because a lot of these people, like, they're really savvy. They're really with it. They're really, you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I see that. I loved that. I love that story. Why community-focused art? What drew you to that?
I think just like a kind of inherent thirst to be a kind person.
Yeah.
And growing up in Wales, where we didn't have access to, you know, the incredible museums you get in London, the incredible like grants programs you get to follow creativity as children, or, you know, like youth clubs, or I know those things are being cut now as well, but I had cousins that were from London. I just remember thinking like, these people are so lucky. My cousins are so lucky. Like, and in Wales, there was just so, and there still is like very much disparity between access to culture in London compared to access to culture outside of London in the rest of the UK. So there was that knowing of like there are unequal like opportunities to access, and then also growing up where there was no representation of brown women or Muslim women or women that were just like other, that I wanted to aspire to. And then on top of that, there was just a knowing and like a deep calling that everyone who helped me in my life, that I felt a real affinity to, were not people that I knew directly. They were Indiari and Jill Scott. They were like Lauren Hill. They were like all activists, and they were people that had so much like hunger. And so I always had that within me. And then part of me is that's just part of my blueprint, is like, I got to here because of my parents, because of my mother, because of my father, because of the blessings that I was given. And not everyone has the same access. So like, I can't just take. I've got to know that when I pass, like I receive the baton from someone and I pass it on to someone. And like, it's never just stops with our generation. And I've just always felt that. And like, there are so many people that we're all striving for the same thing. And when I felt like I didn't belong in London, and when I felt like I was doing that thing of bridging that gap, I made it a point to, like, when I went to New York and I came back, I was like, I never want to put myself in that position again where I'm so lonely, I push everyone away. Because when you are bridging that gap, it's like the friends you have around you don't mirror who you need to become. The circumstances don't show you. So you can feel really lonely and isolated. And I just remember like vowing to myself, I will never allow myself to push people away like that. So then I just like actively went to open mic nights. I went to live music events. I went to things to try and bring in the people that I wanted to like be met with. And so that community, that idea of community, it really, again, it gave me a sense of belonging. And I think you don't have to belong to one community. Like like there were so many different ones that I was part of, so many different meetup groups and so many different, and I was just testing all these different facets of my personality out and like give them room to play. And it does really help. Like, I think that it's like it's almost like a bit of a kitsch word right now, like community, because it's just like,
everyone's trying to, have one, be one, a part of one.
Yeah. And I think that it just kind of almost like loses its like appeal or loses its like relatability in a way, because it almost feels like a sales word now. But I mean, if you think of it as like chosen family, or if you think of it as like kindred spirits, or if you think of it like, I don't know, there's so many other words you can phrase it that like, yeah, it is very important to me because I just know I benefited from that.
I loved what you said about the kind of 4 generations. And you have a painting about that, don't you? Because, I mean, recently, I think I spent some time in India over Christmas, and I found all of these photographs of my grandfather who died when my mum was 2. And so we didn't, at that point, I don't think I'd ever seen like more than one photograph of him. All I had were like bits and pieces of what people had told me and anecdotes. And so when I found those photos, it felt like treasure, and it made me feel connected to, I think, not just my grandfather, but like my great grandfather, because he was in the photos and I knew him, thankfully, but there was this like connection that I felt when I saw this like 2D image of him, but it gave life to this 3D made up memory that I was piecing together from what people had said, and from like the smile and the photo and like the natural charisma that I kind of could see. And it just made me feel like, if my great grandfather came from poverty and really like built a name for himself in the small town that he was from, and then that gave so many opportunities to my grandfather and his family and my mum, and then to me. And sometimes I feel like, gosh, if he'd never strived, if he'd never decided that he wanted to become a doctor, and studied under streetlights and raised money to be able to go to school, I feel like I wouldn't be here. So it's just, yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but what you said made me feel like, yeah, I do get that. I do feel connected to kind of ancestral heritage, like generations in my family kind of thing.
That's something that, A, thank you for sharing. And also B, I think that not only does it lead to the 3D image in your mind, but it also sculpts the person you are and your trajectory and your 4D, 5D, your capacity to love, your capacity to then potentially see and understand your mother, your father from a different viewpoint now that you know where they came, like what they were taught, and then it helps you to hold space for the parts of you that maybe are like your grandfather or we're searching for that. And I think that like understanding yourself, the more we can understand or know thyself, the more we can offer the world. And something that I really want to pick up on is this feeling of entitlement, which I feel uneasy about, like especially in sometimes in our generation, where it's too easy to say like things should have been different. We should have had access to this or these emotions, or this shouldn't have been hidden, or we should have, and I genuinely honestly think most of our parents are doing the best they could have. and they really were, and like with the tools they were given, and vice versa, their parents were doing their best. And the painting and the poem that you reference, 4 generations, it was just super. It's like 4 or 5 lines, and it says, our grandparents ran so that our parents could build, so that we can heal and you can transcend the human race for all. 4 generations, 4 generations. And I wrote it with my nephew in mind, and it's like, our grandparents ran, similar to you. My grandparents came from Bangladesh, from Yemen, from Wales, but they didn't have much money at all, but they moved in search of a better life so that our parents can build. And my parents, their whole dream was to be able to have a home, to be able to not worry about money, to pay for food, to have access to education. My mum always said, like, education was the way out, right? Like, so if we had education, that could be a way out. Then the third line, so that we may heal. And I honestly feel like the work that I'm privileged to do is to heal, and is to like look inside and heal, and to liberate the parts of me. And just by me being in that search of liberation, it liberates another, and vice versa. And then so that you may transcend. So it doesn't stop with me. It's always about like, well, the next generation doesn't have to do what I'm doing. They can pick up where I left off, and no doubt in 20 years' time, they'll be, like saying, that generation, like, they left so much, like, like they left us with the ocean full of plastic, and they left us with like all of these like TikTok reels that are just taking up like energy and all these things. But like, we're always moving forwards. And I just think that I really want to stress that whilst maybe like a lot of people didn't have access to creativity, especially in our diasporas, or we didn't have access to certain levels of emotional intelligence or understanding, I do think the generations above us were often doing the best they could. And to hold that with grace, and to be like, okay, with that being said, where would I like to go? Not, how dare you not give me that access, and I should have had this and I should have had that. It's like, no, it's too easy to point blame. Like, we can do it in a better way. We can do it in a more graceful way, and a more like, and just like a more discreet way.
Yeah, just forgive, I think.
I think that the idea is always, always want to go one step forward, and you always want to leave the next generation with something better, ideally.
100%.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your creative process, because I think it's fascinating as a non-artist, but I just would love to know how you create. So I know from like other female creatives I've spoken to that, and like writers especially, they treat it as like a daily practice and like a commitment to doing it no matter what the result is. It's like you sit down, you write for 30 minutes and you get it done. Is that the same for you, or do you create when like you feel inspired?
Yeah. Discipline.
Yeah.
Just do it. Just sit down and do it. Just get to the thing and do it. It's not as an actor that I admire said to me, hard work is just boring work. And he was talking about when he has to learn lines, and he was like, hard work is not hard, it's just boring. And I think there's something really interesting about that. Like, when you just show up and you just come to the desk, come to the drawing table, come to wherever, and just show up and just keep on doing the thing, the inspiration comes. That being said, if you have that feeling of inspiration, don't ignore it, follow it. So it's like, when you get the I try and do show up every day, and then also, and if you get the inspiration, also make sure you follow that too, because that is nuggets and that is gems. But you can't always necessarily wait for the gems. But be there at the mat, be there at the meditation mat, be there at the prayer mat, be there where you need to tap into flow, and allow yourself to build muscle memory of flow. And like, flow is kind of just a process where you lose, I think it's like your brain goes into theta wave states where it's more malleable, and you're able to build new connections. It's that kind of that thing where time flies, where the thing that you could be doing where you don't need to be paid for, it's just like time flies, or you're just in that sweet spot between being stretched and in your comfort zone. And it's like, that flow state is gold. And so I think what you're trying to do is, or what I'm trying to do is, I'm just trying to like, at least just try and set up the condition. So even if it is like starting my day with always like writing, and then like, meditation, writing before having a screen, or before anything comes with like another perspective comes into my perspective, just trying to keep that like stream of consciousness as clean as possible for as long as I can is really important. Yeah, I do just really see the benefit of just showing up. It's not that glamorous. It's just do it. And I know it's really not that. It's not that deep. Just
It's the best
just do
part
the
when
thing.
it's done.
Yeah. Just do the thing and stop overcomplicating it.
Yeah.
I think like I hear a lot of people like kind of like making so many excuses, and I'm just like, just do it.
Yeah.
20 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. But if you're not doing it, that's fine. But just be honest with yourself and say it's not important enough to me.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, it's like tough love. But
Exactly
I just
what
think,
it is.
yeah.
Yeah. You, in your recent Gremlin Substack newsletter, I loved the Kandinsky Gremlin. I think that's probably one of my favorite ones. And the one I read last night, the past Gremlin.
Yeah.
Loved that one too.
Yeah.
If you are listening to this, you absolutely need to subscribe to Karimah's Substack called The Gremlins, because it is honestly, it's like the most wonderful thing I read. I love a good Substack, and yours is right up there with one of my favorites. The reason I loved the Kandinsky Gremlin, you talk about Kandinsky's belief that art should feel the same as meaningful dialogue, direct and spiritual, and without regard for technique, form, and perfection. And how, to achieve this, the artist must train not only his eye, but his soul. I know you're someone that does a lot of like introspection and self-work. And I'm curious, how do you train your soul?
Ooh. The school of life. I don't even need. How do I train my soul? How do I train my soul? Okay, I'm actually going to ask myself this. By being honest with myself. Yeah, by being honest with myself. I write. I have earnest conversations with people that I admire. I take 100% responsibility for my life. And by doing that, your soul's trained, like you're in soul training, because once you start taking responsibility for your circumstances and where you're at, and with tenderness and grace and elegance, knowing that when I say taking responsibility, it's different. I'm not talking about taking control, but I'm saying like you get to weave the meaning behind the circumstance of your life, and then you get to orchestrate that and fly. And like a bird, you have one wing, which is your control and your action, and the other wing, which is surrender and life and things you cannot control, and you're just meant to fly your path. Soul training looks like being honest with yourself, and when things show up that you need to navigate, you face them, and you speak into them, and you dance with it, and you ask yourself, and you get curious. And I think it's funny because to me, like, surely, like, it's in my head, I'm like, everyone does soul training. Like
Do they? I don't
yeah,
know.
that's what I mean. So I'm like, oh, like surely everyone is like, surely everyone is like kind of is curious about.
I'm not sure everyone is. And I'm not sure I
right.
have been curious about myself until I think 2019. I think that's when I was like, okay, well, who am I? And do I even know myself? Because I feel like sometimes if you're not awake to life or to yourself, and you're not curious about yourself, you sort of accept the narrative that you've been told or you've been telling yourself is true about yourself. And so every choice you make is in line with that narrative. And you're not really questioning anything, because you're like, okay, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing this right. I'm, doing this job. I'm dating this person. I am, all the steps that I'm taking feel like they should be correct.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you believe in like astrology, but I think that my Saturn return happened basically, Karimah. And everything kind of, I think for anyone listening, and I'm not an astrologer or any kind of expert, but during the Saturn return period, which is like 28 to 30 is one of the periods, if you are living in alignment with your soul, everything's perfect and you just carry on going as you were. But if you're not at that point, I think things just fall apart, is my understanding.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened to me. And I was like, I don't know who I am. I need to figure this out. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that happened, because I think if that hadn't happened, I really wouldn't have been curious about myself at all. I really wouldn't have met myself or learned about myself or loved myself.
And that's a testament to your ability to reframe that, to say, hey, I'm curious and I learned these things from it.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening, basically Saturn is think of it like a police officer that comes to your life and checks where you're at. And it's kind of like, so it takes 28 to 32 years for Saturn to come back to where you are when you're born. So that's what's called your Saturn return. So when you're born, Saturn's in a certain place in the sky, and it takes around 28 years to come back. And it's like, it just kind of, it's not that everything goes bad, but you're just, it kind of just comes to check, to make sure you're in where you're meant to be in, and you're in alignment, like you perfectly said. I think I remember, like, I say to myself, like, a hard day for the ego is a good day for the soul. So, like, yeah, it's like, I love a soulful life, and it kind of just counters a lot of what we're taught to take value in, and it really affirms me. It gives me a lot of comfort living from the soul, because that is like abundant. It's expansive. A person who's rich in their soul is like, you couldn't just, they're beautiful for some weird reason that you can't quite explain, because they don't look like the thing on the magazine, or they don't talk in the way they should, but they're so beautiful, or like they're so interesting, or they're so like grounded, or they're so like someone that lives from the soul is just they're undeniable, they're magnetic. And I like those people, and I like the idea of a life filled with people like that. You know, and I just think like, and I like the idea of like a polis, which is like, you know, what makes up politics, like what makes up people. Like, I like the idea of a world full of people that value soul, like, and value the depth of the thing that we are and the connection between us. And a clever man tries to change the world, but a wise man tries to change himself. And it's like, all of the ego stuff is trying to change the world, and it's trying to change the outside, and it's looking for like the external. But the soul stuff comes from internal, and you weirdly change the external by like default when you try and move from the soul. Yeah. I think I'm just a really old soul at heart. Like, I'm an old lady.
Yeah. You've been around for a while.
I don't know.
I feel like that sometimes. I'm like, I've been here for a while, I feel. I call it self-possession, like people that really possess themselves. Like
I feel like that's like, that's okay. Yeah, interesting.
They're like, they belong to themselves, and I feel like you feel it when those people walk in a room. Like, I felt it today when you walked in, and that's not me just saying that because you're on my podcast. I feel your energy, and I feel like it emanates from those people. It emanates from you.
Oh, thank you.
So when you move from the soul, and gosh, that's beautiful to do that on a daily basis, and everyone should want to do more of that. Is it hard? Because I feel like, when I do move from the soul, sometimes in different contexts, say, you know, I have a corporate job during the day, I'm not sure that would go down very well. And I feel like it's just
100%.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard when you're trying to appease an ego world.
Yeah.
You know, it's because some of the actions that your soul wants you to take, they don't make logical sense. They're unexplainable, and they don't need to be justified, but often we feel like we have to justify our actions in this world as well. And so it is hard, because like sometimes it can bruise someone's ego when you do an action that they can't understand because they're meeting it at their level of their life without the reverence for things that are out of their control. When you meet people that move from the soul, it's just like, don't worry, chill.
Yeah.
Like I get it. Like, it's not about me. It's about like this other thing. And like, yeah, meet me when you need to meet me, or you do that and your plans change, cool. Or like, oh, you need to do this, cool. Like they get it. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is also like when your nervous system relaxes, it's most probably because you're with people that value moving from the soul and the way that you navigate. And when it can be hard when you're trying to do certain 9 to 5 things, or like certain kind of rigid requirement things that don't allow for like flexibility in your energy or in your being. And moving from the soul is it's a more like sporadic kind of experience. It takes being able to understand in like 3D, not 2D, you know, like being like understanding things in a linear way is more directional, it's more ego, and it's more the world that we once knew. And I really think that we are moving into more of like a paradoxical world and like a quantum world without like going too far into it. And I think that we will start to learn the art of discernment, the art of reading between the lines and being extremely good at like almost being slightly telepathic, just because of the way we're so ingrained in screens and the ether and the internet. We probably will become way more better at like picking up the intention. But it's hard to move from the soul because it can be unexplainable sometimes. But it's only hard when you're trying to control it.
Yeah.
It's not actually, it's way more in flow. It's quicker, it's quantum, it's miraculous, it's beautiful. But it's harder when you're trying
conscious of it.
When you're trying to almost like justify it.
Yeah.
Or like control it.
Yeah.
Because you can move from the soul, and what could have been true for you can evolve, and you have to be able to like kill the ego multiple times. And that's hard because we don't like change. Like we like comfort.
No. Yeah. And we like to be understood. Yeah. And I think it's easier to not move from the soul and fit with what, everyone else is doing, or like do it the way it needs to be done, rather than think about how you would want to do something.
And I think especially when you're talking about those kind of like corporate worlds, it's really hard in those spaces to try and like be true to yourself sometimes when you're it can probably be quite suffocating and stifling when I have friends in those worlds, and it's like there's a whole other part of their personality that it's like they've got this secret, you know?
I do know.
And it's just again, the payoff is being truly seen. And like the payoff for moving from your soul in those spaces is that like, yes, you might lose reputability, but what you gain is this feeling of belonging that's much more real, that overshadows what you'll lose. But and I also think that there's a lot more people that want to move from the soul in higher up positions that are starting to do so and making it easier. And it will trickle down. So, for example, just 10 years ago, meditation was not spoken about. And it was kind of like associated with, if you were meditating, you were a Buddhist or a monk, or you were kind of devout. And then it kind of it's mainstream narrative now. And it's almost expected that like every billionaire, millionaire, CEO has a meditation practice. And so I really wouldn't be surprised if things evolve in 10, 15 years' time. People start moving from a more intentional, conscious point of view, and then that trickles down into like allowing people to be more sporadic and more spontaneous. But it does take rule breakers to take the leap now.
Or kind of an event like the pandemic or something that like sort of like shakes the consciousness of the world, I think, a little bit.
I don't know.
Not that I want anything like that. But
no. Isn't like, I don't know, isn't like I would love, and I'm so inherently optimistic and hopeful that I love the idea of that. But people often, they don't want to learn.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I feel like we're back to.
So it's like, we have so many global events that could bring us back to this idea of seeing that we're connected. And yet somehow we keep on doing the opposite, and we keep on trying to look for separation and otherness. And it's like, how many examples do we need to know that like we are connected and that we are a global cohesive structure? That like the pandemic was incredible at just sharing that, but then it's like, why aren't we learning that? And that's where I feel kind of like frustrated, because I'm always learning, I'm always trying to grow, and I'm like, why don't people want to learn? Why don't people want to take accountability and move?
I have that feeling sometimes too, and I think of it like you have these moments like the LA fires when like communities get together and you're like, wow, this is, incredibly moving. And then I feel like what happens is there's like this chip that's activated, like, one of those zombie things where like you then become a robot again. And then it's only like something happens, a glitch, and suddenly you become human again. And I feel like we're like constantly oscillating between programming and a break in the programming and programming again, and then the break.
I think this is it. If you open yourself up to feeling, it's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot to feel. There's a lot to kind of take in, and there's a lot of big emotions. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of disparity. There's a lot of lost people. There's a lot, and so if you kind of allow yourself to then be open to that, it's like weird. It can be stifling, and then I think that we do the chip thing, like you said, like zombie thing, as a way of coping, of like numbing and just kind of like focusing on what you yourself.
Yeah.
But I guess the trick and the Jedi-ness of it is like, how can you operate and walk and live in this world where you're open and you have an open heart, but your spine is strong and you're like rooted in the earth and you're of use to this world, and you're not like your head in the sky, pie in the sky, like loving it all, like, and thinking everything's going to be fine, but you're of use. And also you're not jaded and like you've given up and your heart is closed. So I would just think of like open heart, strong spine. Like if you only have an open heart, you're like a jellyfish. You're not of use, you're just like kind of like floating around. And if you only have a strong spine, you're not the epitome of what it is to be human. And I think that like that is soul training, to do both and to live with compassion and love, but be of use in the world. And I think the zombie thing that you reference is like, it's a way of like protecting us from our own responsibility to care for others. And then those like in pattern interrupts where we have this moment of like, no, there are people suffering, there are people dying, we need to help. That's when like the heart opens. But what we're not taught is how to protect the heart. We're not taught like how to open our heart and to live in the world with an open heart, because you that's what children are. And then we kind of like put all these conditions on to be accepted, to be loved. And then all of a sudden you start to like put these like barriers to close the heart. And I think soul training is to really open your heart and to be compassionate, but to protect it and understand how to protect your energy, how to protect your thoughts, how to protect your intentions, how to protect your judgments, and just to kind of like keep on coming back to that. Because this swing that you're talking about of like, you kind of get these like big spikes in emotion, like something devastating happens, you get a big spike in emotion, and then you almost get like an emotional come down, or you almost become fatigued, or you get like numb, or you're like, I can't do this, and then you kind of shut down in order to preserve oneself. And instead of going like this, like at a pendulum, we'd probably be of more use if we could just, again, go the middle path and like not be so overwhelmed by emotion, but also not be so numb to others. And it's like, I think that really is like soul work, is like how to gracefully tread the middle path. And it's not doesn't sound very glamorous or sexy, and it's not going to get like clickbait and media. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just very like, like when I said to you, just show up and do the work. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard, but it's not that complicated.
Yes.
I think similar thing here is like, just go the middle path.
Yeah.
Like, be informed, but don't be so taken that you can't be of use in the world. And it's so easy to say, but so hard to do, because it's hard. Like, there's a lot out there in the world and it is really hard, but it's a very long answer. Sorry.
No, it's
Yeah, I think the middle path is like ideal.
Is that how you, because I know like we spoke about this, but is that how you navigate the world as like a person that feels a lot?
A lot.
Yeah.
Like, as in, like, I feel like I have to also just, like, I come home and I have to shower. I have to like wash things off me. I have to, like, when I'm in the tube, I have to like imagine and just like kind of just like really just kind of, there are also like energetic practices that I do to safeguard myself. And then, as a person that feels a lot in the world, again, this comes from like growing up. I didn't really have the tools to be able to navigate and express. And it's so funny that I'm talking now, because I hated speaking when I was a kid. I didn't really speak much. I was very shy. I didn't have the capacity to speak to the extent of
so
which,
beautifully.
thanks,
Yeah.
but I didn't really. So that's grown with me as I've learned to unlock my voice and to really share myself. And I think when you feel a lot in the world, it can be overwhelming because you don't know how to express. You don't know what ways to express. And I think as best as you can, like, give yourself the gift of being able to like move emotions through yourself without judgment. So whether that's like speaking to someone, writing honestly, moving the energy in working out, or listening to music and just feeling that back at you. But it's just like something about when you feel a lot, you got to also just honor that that's just part of your dynamic and that's part of your being. And there's sensitive, like, people are great. And I was always taught that sensitivity was a bad thing. Like, sensitive meant like you cried and you were quote unquote weak and things like that. And like, I had to kind of undo a lot of that and realize that my sensitivity was a gift. But when you feel a lot, part of the gift of that is that you're incredibly attuned to detail, like detail in others, detail in the environment, detail in the world. And you get to give that back in what you give to the world. So you get to give nuance, you get to give detail, and you get to like share that to the world.
And when you are sharing that to the world, because it comes from a place of so much, it's so personal and it's such a part of you, your work. I'm speaking from my own personal experience. It feels so vulnerable. It feels almost like you're putting a piece of yourself out there and it's up for like public critique. And you do that on a daily basis. How do you do that? How do you get past like the vulnerability? Yeah, that feeling of it all.
Yeah, a few things. One of the things that helps is like knowing that how someone judges something is more of a remark on what's going on with them than it is on me. So like, how someone judges something, like they're actually telling me a lot about what's going on with them. Like, that's actually kind of fun and interesting and curious. And then secondly, it's not my duty to know how it's received. It's just my duty to share and just be the channel. And then however it's received is not my responsibility. However it's circulated is not my responsibility. It's just my duty to show up and to say, like, use me, where do you want me to go? Like, I pray to God, but like, that just helps me, because it helps me just to reduce my own importance and just see myself as, the vessel to be played through. And I think that it just kind of takes the importance out of my own
ego
and like judgment. And then I just kind of also bring it back to like how many artists really helped me. And, like when I was growing up, especially, and even now, like how many artists I'm so thankful for that like shared themselves, that I owe it. It's like due diligence, it's like part of that relay race of passing the baton on, is knowing that I'm here because the weirdest things, like I think now, like I used to like recite Tupac's like when you were a kid and you had like the albums and you would read the pamphlets inside. Better Days, the album. Like I'm like the biggest hip hop head and jazz head, and like I was like 7 listening to Jamiroquai, like reading the tracks back, or like listening to Nat King Cole, reading the tracks back, or like I said, Tupac, like all these people. And I think of all these like great artists that influenced me, that if they were self-conscious and didn't show that bit, or when Lauryn Hill's voice breaks and you're like, oh, it doesn't sound right, but it's good.
Yeah.
Or when Nina Simone's voice breaks and it's good, like it shouldn't be good. And I think for all those circumstances when like it's not perfect, but in the imperfection is where I was like, oh, there's a bit in me there. And, you know, and as a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 14-year-old, like part of therefore my duty is that even though I know what I'm doing now is not perfect, it's not where I want it to be. There's a gap between my taste and what I'm putting out there, and that gap, it drives me and it stifles and kills me at the same time, knowing that all I'm trying to do is just close that gap every day. But like, I have to keep on sharing because I benefited from other artists sharing, and I would be a hypocrite if I don't therefore share. And it's painful. I don't want to do it all the time, but then sometimes I look back at all things. I rarely ever do. I rarely ever like look back at my stuff, but then I'll look back and I'll be like, oh, that's actually a bit better than I thought. Or oh, there's something nice there. And it's like, I'm so glad I'm doing this because there's a journey there that I can track back, that others can track back. And I do it so that like I always think to myself, oh, I wish like if Basquiat lived a few decades more, like how amazing would it have been, like what would his Instagram look like? What would Picasso's Instagram look like? Or like what would like Lina Bobadi's like sketchbooks and Instagrams or like threads look like? Like I always think about like what would I want of my artists that I love to have left? And then again, I'd be a hypocrite if I'm not doing what I would have loved them to have done. So
God, I love that.
yeah, I think just kind of, even though it's self-conscious, it will help someone else who's on their start out journey be able to relate, you know?
Yeah.
I think.
I was listening to a few interviews that you did, and you said this Neil Gaiman quote, which I think is really relevant here. So I'm going to read it. You said, "The moment that you feel just possibly you are walking down the street naked, exposing too much of your heart and your mind and what exists on the inside, showing too much of yourself, that is the moment you might be starting to get it right." I thought it was like the most perfect way of describing what it feels like, and how lovely that that's when you might be starting to get it right.
Yeah, that was he wrote a commencement speech. I think it was Harvard graduate commencement speech. It's I've seen it.
I watched loads of those, by the way.
Countless times. Oh my gosh, I've watched so many of them.
Same.
And I've seen that get like that Neil Gaiman speech at least 30, 40 times. And there's a message in it which is, in good times and in bad, make good art. And then he says, and while you're at it, make your art, because the world needs to hear your voice and hear it through you. And there's something so beautiful about that whole speech. I recommend anyone watches it, because I watched it before I even thought I would ever be an artist. And it's just so funny how things come back on themselves, because I'm like, this speech has just grown with me as I've evolved. It's just like even more relatable, even more understandable, even more useful. And that's part about like walking down the street naked is only when you start to get it right. It's not even like you're on it and you're into a winner, then it's like, oh, you just entered the race, you know? And I think yeah, that sentiment of what you feel like is naked and what you think is naked to you, someone else needs it. Someone else needs it. And I know it can be scary, but that's where bravery comes in. And in light of like referencing great people, Maya Angelou, you know, she said something about like the greatest attribute we can have is courage beyond anything else, because even more so than love, because it's easy to love. I'm paraphrasing this, but it's like it's easy to love in the good times, but when it gets hard, that's when you need courage to love. And I think the same thing with sharing your art. You know, it's easy to share when you know it's going to land well, when you know it's going to be liked, when you know that maybe there's not much to lose. But when there are real things at stake and there's fear, that's when bravery and courage comes in, and you need to be courageous. And everyone has that in them.
I love that. It honestly feels very therapeutic.
It's probably just my like general just chilled atmosphere.
Very at peace.
Yeah.
You also wrote a beautiful reflection on sisterhood, which was part of the Gremlins Substack. And, you talk about sisterhood, whether it's by bond or blood or influence. So I kind of wanted to ask you what you love most about sisterhood.
I think forgiveness. I'm just like looking into your eyes and thinking that it's like forgiveness, because being a person in this world is hard. And I think it's, identifying as a woman and being a woman in this world has its own challenges. Very unique, very nuanced, very layered. And probably unless you're incredibly self-reflective, you won't even understand the hairline nuance of what it means to live with the prejudice of certain things. And when there's just so much expectation or so many like sensitivities to that experience of being a woman, having sisters that know that inherently and can be there with you and by you and stand for you, that forgiveness, like that self-forgiveness, is like you just feel seen. And I love men. Like I love humans, and I also don't, like when I say masculine and feminine, I also mean like the energy within and how it wants to be shared and expressed. But sisterhood, there's like a real, it's like, forget the things that you're meant to be, forget the things, forget all the like the pedestals and whatever else. Like there's a space that you can just be, and you can laugh and we can have fun with it and we can melt, and you're like, you can just be. And it's like, it's really nice. It's a really like comforting feeling. Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to share?
Just that I think what I do love about creativity is alchemy, and like how we can use, like, you don't have to be creative to be creative. Everyone is creative. Everyone has the ability to understand contradiction and bridge. And to me, that's what creativity is. Creativity is to see two apparent contradicting things and find a connection. Everyone can do that, and everyone can alchemize their inner environment and make gold from it. And I think that that's something that I just stand by, like, and that's something I can really feel into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And one final question, Karimah. When was the last time you saw a piece of art or read a book or were touched by something that moved you?
It's really interesting, actually, because the first thing that comes to mind was I went to the Tate Modern on Saturday, so just a few days ago, and there's this room in the Tate. It's called like the studio room or something like that, in studio, and it's like so the Tate Modern's free to go to. There's paid exhibitions, but there's many floors that are free. What I love about the Tate is that you'll get families, you'll get people on like Hinge first dates, you'll get like artsy fartsy 60-year-old people wearing the best glasses and the best shoes, and you'll get people that are just like, it's just like every walk of life, because it's free. And that's why I love the Tate Modern. And I like going there just to people watch. But there's a room there, and they have like 40 pieces of work all like strung up in different parts of the room, and they're kind of like each kind of peculiar. And there was this one piece that I'd never really seen before. And what's really cool about the Tate is that even though they have these curated rooms, they change them every few weeks and months, so they're always different. And I walk into the room, and there was this painting, and it was about 3 meters off the ground. Everyone was walking past it, and I was just drawn to it. I was pulled into it, and I was like, this is just perfect. Like it's not depicting anything, but just the harmony of it, the balance of it. I don't know who it is, but it's soothing yet powerful, but like it's just like incredible. It's just like perfect. You couldn't change a thing. It's just like perfect in its rawness, but perfect because it's crafted. It's not by someone who doesn't know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, and the weight is just like, you could just smell it. It's like, it's just perfect. I was like, who is this? Like, it's like you can barely take a picture of it. everyone's walking past and stuff. I was like, I'm curious. I walked to the side and it was a Mark Rothko, but it was before he'd done a lot of the big color block work and a lot of his bigger works. And I remember thinking, yeah, like that's genius. Like people that their style can change and they can evolve, but their spine, their spirit, their taste, there's a thread there. And I remember just thinking, like, how crazy is it that whole room, like my heart was like boom, like drawn to the Rothko. Like it doesn't look like a Rothko, but like my heart knew there was an element of truth 3 meters up in the room, like in that thing. And I remember just thinking, okay, so even if my work evolves, there will be a spine that threads through it all. Or like an author, like even if their work evolves, there'll be
a signature,
an imprint, a smell, an essence, a frequency. And yeah, that was really cool because I just remember thinking, A, I love that Rothko, and B, I was like, yeah, I got good taste. I was like, I see that. Like, I see it. I can smell something that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got that, like, I don't know what they say in the art world, but that nose for it.
Well, I
felt like it was like a connection between you and the painting.
Yeah. So that was nice. That was unexpected, but it was lovely because I'd never seen a Rothko like that before. It was really nice. So yeah.
Oh, just want to live inside your brain.
You don't. Trust me, you don't.
I think I do. Karimah, I honestly don't know where the time's gone. I really, really enjoyed this. It was lovely to meet you. And thank you so much for being a guest on the pod.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for creating this. And thank you for your questions and your presence. And you. Thank you.
Thank you.